and we're taking it a little bit further, and we're actually going to be broadcasting live from Southampton, so we're going to be in the heart of the action. We have in-studio guests, we have outside correspondents, we have a breaking news team, so you can be assured that we will have all the latest when it happens. We're covering across the UK with our correspondents in places like Leeds, Liverpool, Hello and welcome to this special edition of Winchester News Online. For the next 4 hours we will be covering today's National Day of Protest. A massive turnout has been predicted, with schools and airports already hit around the UK. Our reporters are already in place.
I think the march is going to be huge. I mean, every indicator says there'll be tens of thousands of people from across all of the unions on that. There were over 1,000 marches and rallies happening across the UK today. The London one, of course, I think, given the size of London, will be one of the biggest.
The number of demonstrators has been increasing significantly since early this morning. Will is likely reporting for Chester News.
Here's the bus that's travelling around the city. This is transporting union officials, union supporters and members of the media. Visiting different sites where people are on strike, various picket lines.
Here in Basingstoke, we're outside Festival Place Shopping Centre, where the rally is set to begin. As you see, no one's actually here yet, but it's not due to start for another hour yet, so there should be a few people arriving.
I'm here in Lincoln's Inn Fields near Holborn, where the marches are about to start any minute now. There's an estimated 50 to 70,000 people that are going to be joining in the demonstrations today. Looking around, we haven't quite reached that number yet, but there is definite excitement in the air.
At London Metropolitan University today, students and union members will be forming picket lines around the university before heading.
The picket lines are in place around the country, but the turnout is lower than expected. In Basingstoke, though, organisers claim there is huge support, and in London, anti-capitalist protesters are gathering. But first, a look at the story so far.
I don't harbour any resentment over them striking. I'd probably strike myself if I was in that situation.
They're paying more into the pension and getting less out of it.
It's courts, job centres, tax offices, driving test centres, coastguards and many others will be asking strikers to leave the picket lines late morning.
As much as possible, we're hoping that essential services will not be affected.
That at the moment the public seem to be paying back through their pensions on a debt that's not really their own fault, and this is perhaps a government issue that's got us into this debt.
Oh, well, I would agree with you that it is the fault of government that we do have this debt, but it's not the fault of this government. It's the fault of the last Labour government, who over the past 10 years, while in office ran a budget deficit.
At this moment it's fantastic, considering this is the first rally we've ever held in Basingstoke. So I'm really delighted with the people that's turned out, and we are expecting more. We're not leaving for another 15 minutes, so yeah, it's going to grow and will grow.
Dramatically. So there is a worry there in terms of the future and the long-term future. But if you want retrospectively change the pension arrangements for staff who are already in employment, it seems to us is not fair.
Could just come to you, Seb. Yeah. As student union president, how will these cuts even affect the university and the students of the university?
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to have to disagree with Ross. I think, just aside away from the question to start with, Conservatives are in power.
Or he was until last week, I think, the youngest council in Britain.
In Liverpool.
Okay, in Liverpool. Okay.
He's obviously been very quick to take him up on that and has called the strikes nothing more than a damp squib. So his views on it are obviously very different to Ed's.
Okay, and have we had any more Twitter updates on the amount of people, the turnout for today?
The numbers locally are very, very high, actually. We're receiving updates that up to 20,000 people are striking in the centre of Southampton. That's the local statistic.
And protests across the UK.
They are very angry about what's happened, but also they are fed up with being the whipping boy for everything.
Workers striking across Hampshire is huge, especially the effect that it's going to have on Southampton is very, very large, as Southampton has already been affected by months and months of rolling strikes.
It has indeed. Thank you for that, George, and we will come back to you later. Hello and welcome back to Winchester News Online's live coverage of National Strike Day. I'm Hannah Keegan. Some of today's headlines. Unions claim up to 2 million workers are out on strike today, but less than a third of civil servants are taking part in minor delays. The latest from Southampton is an increasing number of people are joining in with the strike. We are now going to go and try to go live to Liverpool with our correspondent Liam Devaney to give us the latest.
It's very quiet, and both our tunnels were closed today, and normally we have up to 95,000 vehicles going through the tunnels each day, so it's been quite eerie going round the city. And there's been a lot of support for the picket lines. Certainly the general noise in the city with the traffic has been really low.
Every time there's a crack at the whip, the bin lads always get the full force of it. We're the ones that have to suffer it first of all.
We did not want to take this action, but nobody can afford to lose money.
Over the summer, rubbish accumulated on the pavement for 7 weeks. In October, social workers joined binmen and council workers in coordinated strike action.
Had to suffer been quite substantial, up to 15% of their normal take-home pay.
They demonstrated outside the civic centre after over 1,000 people marched through the city centre.
We're going to carry on. We're not here for the short term. We're here for the long term. Yeah?
But the conflict between the council and unions went on.
We don't want to go down the route of losing people that are delivering key services to the residents, but if things do go on, then we will have to take some action because the public are saying.
Going on, it's in Guild Square. People are talking, people are ringing their horns now. There's talks going on at the time. What's led up to here has been 2,000 people.
Reporter Gable spoke to some of the important figures involved in today's action.
What are you hoping to achieve from the strikes today?
Well, we need government to move away from their red lines. I'm a part of the negotiation.
The workers that are paying for it. It's ordinary working people up and down the land, whether they work in the private sector or the public.
You are watching Winchester News Online's coverage of the national strikes over public sector pensions. We are broadcasting live from Southampton. I'm Cara Lathwaite. Thousands of schools have shut and a large number of operations have been cancelled in hospitals. David Cameron has called the strike something of a damp squib, along with calling Ed Miliband left-wing, irresponsible and weak during Prime Minister's questions, ahead of a national march in London.
I'm here today with Nigel Fox, who is head of the Winchester Trade Union Council. So Nigel, first, do you mind telling me why exactly you're here today?
What you've got here is a gathering of all the public sector unions are represented here to defend their pensions.
Being targeted for cuts when it's unnecessary. Public sector pensions are fully funded and the government knows this, as does the local government association. We won't stand for this anymore. The public sector workers are paying.
Certain areas need to be cut, including pensions. What would you say to that?
Well, quite simply, in any crisis like this, if you make people unemployed, you put back
next step off this.
To force the government into completely retracing its step on by making cuts on them, that's not going to happen.
We'll of course keep you up to date on everything that's happening here and around Winchester, but for now, back to you.
It says 2,000 union members have gathered on Southampton's Guildhall Square. The National Indoor Arena in Birmingham is filling with union members. We've just received these pictures from Basingstoke. It's a small town, but it seems to be a very big demonstration.
300,000 more unemployed public sector workers. The pay freeze is going to carry on for more years. They are not listening, and they need to. They need to hear the stories of how their cuts are hurting your services, the services you provide to people, some of whom are the most vulnerable.
CU, the Universities and College Union. Tom Morgan reports.
As strikes take place today, unions are actively
saying just because the private sector's pensions are, for a lot of people, sometimes really rubbish, doesn't mean that people with good pensions, theirs has to be dragged down as well.
A few moments ago, early figures from UNITE have suggested that 25,000 people are on march in London.
That's a huge. Is that an expected turnout or is that a surprise?
And the early reports suggested there were going to be up to 100,000 people striking in London, though this is significantly lower than that. But from the pictures that we're seeing, it still looks to be a huge turnout. Marches, yeah.
Right, thanks, George. We do actually have pictures from London. We have just got in now. As we can see, there is actually quite a big turnout, as George has described. People there, it's still looking fairly peaceful, despite the 30 unions are out on strike today, and our reporter Daniel Mackerel explains who is who on this day of action.
Workers go on strike over pensions, pay and cuts. Around 25 unions taking part in the walkout, which is set to be one of the biggest in the country's history. A huge trade union congress rally has been organised for central London, with the aim of a services union and many more. While the government continues to stand firm, the unions hope that the strikes will be a key step towards new negotiations. Daniel Mackerel, Winchester News Online.
Well, we can now return to our in-studio discussion with Jake Gable.
Thank you for that, Cara. And now joining me is Councillor Richard Williams, Opposition Labour Leader for Southampton City Council. Now, Richard, let's get into the heart of it, shall we, straight away. Ed Balls has said that George Osborne's Plan A has failed colossally. How accurate is that statement?
The opinions that they've spoken of.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Aaron. Now it's time to take a quick look at the story so far of today.
I don't harbour any resentment over them striking. I'd probably strike myself if I was in that situation.
They're paying more into the pension.
Has this.
And what would you say the next step is after this demonstration?
Welcome back to Winchester News Online. I'm Hannah Keegan. We're still broadcasting to you live from Southampton today. Here's a summary of some of today's latest headlines. Thank you, George, and thank you for joining us today. That is all from our live broadcast from Southampton today. We have been on air for 4 hours now, and we've had a record number of views for a student broadcast. We'd also like to thank Unite the Union for letting us use their headquarters today, although we have, of course, tried to remain impartial. Don't forget to tune in next week for our regular WINOL bulletin, but that is all from us today. Goodbye.